Hello, y'all. Welcome back to the Word 111 podcast. Today is a fun day because we have some special guests here with us in the group. Let me introduce you to Zoe, James, Anna, Karis, and I'm Xander. I'll be your host. Today, this group has come all the way from JSB to join us in talking about overconsumption and how it affects the environment. So, without further ado, Zoe, why don't you start us off? Then we'll put her here, and then right into James. James, you can pick up.
All right. Yeah, so as Zoe was saying, social media, primarily how young adults use it, contributes to the problem we see with overconsumption. So like social media, it promotes overconsumption through ads, entertainment, and trend. And it's like the platform that delivers overconsumption content. So like you see on TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube ads, even like the Super Bowl ad from like a year or two ago that had Timo on it. These are like the platforms that show people's overconsumption habits, like also trends like water talk, like daily, make my water of the day, and then like Sheen Halls and Stanley Cup accessories, like videos like these. Another college student was saying, Davis 2023 said, it creates harmful standards and like it makes your life unrealistic and unattainable, and it matches like a particular aesthetic, which not everyone can do, especially like us as college age students. I don't know if anyone else sees something like that in their lives.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
It's like not only are these videos on TikTok and like that show this kind of content, TikTok also has like in-shop or in-app shopping platforms like TikTok Shop. It's like so cheap. It's basically like all novelty products, and it's also like constantly advertised on your feed. Like every other feed or every other video that you see when you scroll, it's basically an ad. So like it kind of imitates Shein and Temu. And like the oldest example I can think of is like Wish from 2018 and 2019. Like I feel like everyone and their moms were like using Wish in like before then, but now it's all about Shein and Temu, which I think is interesting because like TikTok's algorithm like also plays a role in these feeds. And I know we didn't talk about algorithms that much, but I still feel like it adds into the component of that overconsumption content and how it is delivered to us.
I completely agree because I'm not on social media that often. But even when I'm on there, I'm getting ads for like Temu and Shein. And I don't buy stuff off of social media. Like how are they finding me? But like I like what you talked about and like getting into the nitty gritty of like how they can like I don't want to use the word manipulate, but like market towards any buyer for anything essentially.
Yeah, they can really market well because I've seen on Temu especially, I've scrolled on there and they're like, oh, you get this present and like this counts towards like $10 or whatever, so you can use it next, but you have to pay this much on your purchase, which is silly.
Yeah. So I feel like these people like after they buy everything, or like these people might be even like getting commissions. Like on TikTok, you can see like the ads and videos that show different products. Like it says creator earns commissions. I feel like these creators, like because they're buying and because they're like participating in this overconsumption and sharing it on their platform, it like even further exacerbates the issue.
I completely agree. Being a part of the cheer team, there are two girls that are like sponsored by Alani, and they're making like Alani videos or make this drink with me using an Alani or whatever. And it's of course it has to be non-alcoholic, but at the same time, like they're posting it on their feed so they can get money for like well right now it's NIL because they're still in sport, but once they become like regular adults, they'll still be sponsored by Alani, which is pretty interesting to see. Like help them make their video like, hey, there's two girls on the team that are sponsored by makeup companies, and they're like, get ready with me for game day, blah blah blah. And like I see that all the time on my feed, not only because they're my teammates and I follow them, but like that's the stuff that's on there. I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like all that advertising and like consumption, it's like addictive. Like a CBS News interviewed like a Temu shopper, and she said that it's basically just like a way to pass the time, and it's like pure entertainment. So I feel like this kind of content is like it's a microdose of dopamine every time you scroll. Like that's how scrolling kind of works, like doom scrolling. Like this little hit of dopamine makes you want to scroll so much more, and like you get stuck in the cycle of looking at cheap stuff, and it's like fun.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they make it. Like, you get trapped.
Very addicting.
Completely agree with that.
So, like this, social media, it's like basically just telling you to spend, spend, spend. Like you're not even like shopping. You don't have to go out and shop anymore. You can just click a button and you can buy stuff. It's like these like trends and like emotional appeals to persuade you to buy stuff. I feel like what social media has become for a lot of people is like this fear of missing out.
I completely understand. I've got a few friends that I just know they're like shopping to like, I don't know, get some sort of something from it because social media is not like giving them what they need anymore. And then eventually they just have the stuff that they're like, oh yeah, I bought that 2 weeks ago, and they're done using it or whatever it is, or like an article of clothing that they wore once. So I don't know. That's something we'll probably get into here in a second.
All right. Well, thank you, James. It is important to know how brands vaguely advertise for the reasons that they like don't mention, specifically like how they're benefiting. And you touched on Temu and Shein, but I want to touch on the underlying environmental impacts made by these brands and other brands. So, to get into it, large manufacturers distribute its items at a lower cost. Brands such as Shein, H&M, and Amazon have managed to influence consumers in all of fast fashion trends. The production's flexibility within the worker's wage and ways to provide support to the environment has very much decreased due to the high demand of fast fashion. And environmental impacts, including clothing waste, water use, pollution, and carbon emissions, are what I will be talking about. So, how did fast fashion begin? In 1990, a company named Zara launched the so-called fast fashion, and they only took 15 designing days before they launched it in their store. And this is just one of the backgrounds I'll give you about a brand, but also, according to Williams, the company Nike closed its production in the U.S. and moved overseas. They were making $2.7 million in 1993, and all the way in 1995, so 2 years later, they were making $88 million. And so Levi and Vans, these companies wanted to copy this, but they were unsuccessful. And Levi then made their new launch after they were unsuccessful way more expensive because they wanted to make up for lost profit. So, let's see. Companies then moved to online stores to abide by this trend, the fast fashion. Let's see. Let's get into the environmental impacts. So, excessive water usage has negatively impacted the environment, but this doesn't mean like the water is being polluted as a byproduct. Let's see. Dyeing textiles is where most of the water pollution comes from, but this is not what the water use is expected. It is expected to increase by 1% each year. And also, crude oil is needed for processing synthetic fibers, and a large energy source is also crucial. So, according to Williams, around 500,000 tons of microfiber, which is equivalent to 3 million barrels of oil, is now being dumped into the ocean every year.
That's insane. That's a lot. That is crazy.
I don't think I could imagine it quite clearly, but so also surrounding this pollution, consumers are also washing their clothes. Obviously, I need to do that. You all need to do that. I mean, I hope you do. So there's so much pollution in the waters that people are wondering, are there health issues arising? And these health issues might be like starvation, endocrine disruptions, stunted growth, and yada yada. But that's just a little part of the environmental impacts that affect the consumers that they don't really think of. Question. Do you think it's up in the air, or do you agree with like the studies you may have seen? Like, yeah, like some like these synthetic fibers or like certain things that are in your clothes that are processed in these big companies. Like, do you know where it comes from? Do you all think about that ever?
Yeah, no, definitely, because like it's not a question anymore. It's like there are actually like microplastics in our water. Every time we wash our clothes, like stuff gets out, and like this dye, like when you talked about water pollution, there's like this like famous, I don't know, not quote, but it's like if you want to know the trends for next year, just look at the watercolors in China because it's like the dye that they use washes away, and it's like you can see it so clearly.
That's insane.
I think a lot about, I don't know about you guys, but I watched this Nike documentary on like the sweatshops when I was in like middle school. And I recently learned that Nike doesn't say how much they produce each year, but it's a known fact they produce the most waste of any company. And I think it's just interesting that like we don't know how much of anything some of these companies are producing.
Yeah, they're just not even putting it out there.
Yeah.
And like when Anna, you were talking about like Levi's, they promote themselves as like an American-made brand, and they're obviously way more expensive than any other jean. At least when I'm shopping for jeans, I'm like, I will not buy Levi's because they're just expensive. It's not that they're like any better made. It's just that they're like trying to compensate for lost profit and the fact that people can just outsource all their workers and like resources from somewhere else. Which, you know, from a buyer's perspective, you're like, okay, well, those are more expensive, therefore I'm just going to buy the cheaper pair. But at the same time, like, if you're thinking about the environment, the cheaper pair is not the cheaper pair for the environment. The cheaper pair for the environment is the one that's made in America and will, like, literally, the only, I guess, downside is that it's just being shipped across America rather than across the whole globe via boat, train, or, you know, airplane, cargo, truck. There's a lot less steps with buying American-made products, and I think that's a big one there. Yeah,
I agree with all of you. So another environmental impact that I came across was climate change. Through the article I found by Williams, she mentions that by 2030, polluting microfibers should increase by 50%, and then consequently, climate change and global warming is affected with also the use of greenhouse gas emissions. So I will give you a little bit of background and then I'll ask you all a question. So let's see. Such low prices of fuel trends were where wealthy are influenced by hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of clothing simply because they can. Such purchases are not out of necessity for clothes. Rather, they are made in desperate attempts to maintain online relevancy. Do you think that these are the most popular people who favor fast fashion, like the wealthy influencers, or should it be people who actually need it? Is that a good question?
That's a great question because, you know, like people who need clothes obviously want to get them for a cheap price, but people who also have a lot of clothes also want to get them for a cheap price. You know what I mean? Like, so it's very easy to overbuy when you have quite a bit. But no, I've never thought of that question before.
Yeah, I just think that obviously the wealthier influencers, especially when they're on TikTok and they're making videos like you said earlier, if they're sponsored or not, they only get it because they can and like they want to. I mean, if I saw a good piece of clothing, I would love to have it. It just depends on how I would get it. But they don't get it just because they need it.
I also think that when they post so much about, like influencers post so much about fast fashion, they influence their audience to purchase a lot of fast fashion because they come up with the idea that like I'll be able to dress like them without thinking about a lot of their wardrobe isn't fast fashion. They have a lot higher income usually and they can purchase really nice items. So there's very few that are actually fast fashion in their closet, but people get the impression that majority of their wardrobe is fast fashion.
Oh, for sure. I would agree with that because like they're obviously they're getting paid to push fast fashion, but they're not dressing that way. I completely understand. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, like influencers influencers don't go out and thrift and look for like already worn clothes before.
Yeah.
And even those thrift clothes are expensive.
Yeah.
Let's see. So lastly, there's this quote found through another article. Bryn, she touches on the dishonesty around Shein. So the dishonesty, in fact, manipulation on Shein's sustainability page, as well as the predatory ways in which Shein capitalizes on their malleable and useful demographic, plainly demonstrates the selfish maneuvers at which Shein will employ to stay popular. And I think this is so important because, like I mentioned earlier, they find a way to benefit their company, but so they can acquire an income. But obviously, as I've touched on, the environmental impacts are negative. They're decreasing. Pollution's going up. Yeah. So
Yeah, I think like Shein used to be more about clothes, but now that like other competitors are out, like TikTok Shop and Temu, they're switching more to like other products like toys and like household
household
appliances.
items. So yeah, H&M, Shein, and Amazon are popular brands that distribute an exponential amount of textiles. These brand-specific materials used in textiles do not limit the negative impacts on the environment. Polyester and other synthetic fibers are mainly used in the largely produced textiles to benefit the fashion trend. Large manufacturers are able to rotate their clothing inventory to abide by the fast fashion trend and to deceitfully acquire an income. In addition to these harmful substances in the environment, low prices and wage are an underlying concern people don't usually think about when they buy from these large manufacturers.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. You had some really good stuff there. That was really amazing points. And I really like how you pointed out some of the more specific brands contributing to overconsumption as a whole, and like where our stuff is coming from, and getting us to think just a little bit differently about just overconsumption as a whole. I've prepared a little bit here, but I would say that overconsumption harms the environment by generating excessive waste, depleting resources, and causing pollution, largely driven by the fast fashion industry, like you were talking about, and unstable production and disposal of products. So, like, kind of getting more into, like, after they're done with the item, where does it go? And so, that being said, let's jump right into some evidence that I found. This one's from The Rising Trend of Overconsumption, article online written by several different women and a group of female writers, actually. And it says, in general, the fast fashion industry alone contributed to 92 million tons of waste and used 97 million liters of water to create clothing, reported by the Center for Biological Diversity. So just the mere thought of thinking of that many, millions of liters and millions of tons of an item is insane, because 2 tons realistically is like half of the back of a pickup truck. Like if you filled it up with rocks,
Yeah.
that's 2 tons is half of the back of a pickup truck. So 4 tons is what you can fit in the back of a pickup truck, which is crazy. And 92 million of those, that's insane. Now obviously they're not all in one place, but when they're distributed around the world, it's still trash. Like it's still out there. And like what you said, James, about looking in the waters in China of you want to discover the trend for next year, look in the waters of China. That's an insanely good quote, and definitely deals with the overconsumption polluting the earth. My second example comes from the same article, and it says, according to the data from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, 17 million tons of textile waste ended up in landfills in 2018. So that was just 1 year of overconsumption produced 17 million tons. That's a substantial amount that is not really being talked about in mainstream media. Any thoughts on that?
That's just like a giant number, and obviously if it's spread out like across the U.S., it's less, but it's all just sitting there. Like it's not gonna like decompose like compost is gonna like become soil.
Exactly. Like that's like those are in landfills. That's not going anywhere. It's not going to decompose. I remember doing like a bunch of trash for cash for like my elementary school or middle school, and like picking up trash on the side of the road. And the one thing that always like never like it was there, but it didn't like biodegrade was like t-shirts, pants, shorts, whatever, like clothing fell out of the back of a truck or like was thrown out of a car. It was always there, and it was always covering up grass. That and tires for some reason. It was always everywhere. But going into my third article, it's actually from Environment America. So it's talking about waste from Amazon specifically, which is obviously probably the biggest online shopping store in the world. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't know the actual like which one is, but I'm pretty sure it is. And it says the waste crisis has already been bad enough with nearly 60 million tons of electronic waste poisoning our environment each and every year. The last thing we need is Amazon turning hundreds of thousands of unusable products into toxic waste. So this article focused specifically on returns from Amazon, like what they do with the returns. And I was like, initially reading the article, I was like, okay, it's just like, they're going to return it back into their inventory and sell it again. Like, okay, that's a great way to, I guess, make money, whatever. But no, a lot of the times their returns, they're just destroyed or sent out to be resold by like third party kind of stingy people. But I would say, I think in the article, it talks specifically about one person ordered something, put an air tag in their order, and then sent it back. So they had 5 different articles of clothing that went 5 different places upon its return into 4 different countries. And those countries were disposing of the product not in a way, like 2 of them went to Africa, and they were like, okay, maybe it went to young kids, but they found exactly like where it was in the landfill. So it's just not moral things that you think about. And it really opened my eyes to this entire thing of just throwing out what we would consider old, unusable, like shirts, sweatshirts, whatever, or something that doesn't fit that you ordered and returned back to specifically this company, Amazon, which they got caught and fined for. And I think they're probably trying to be better. I would assume so. After this article got out and went public not too many years ago. So in today's day and age, there's more waste than ever out there. Just to function as a society already, we generate tons of waste using water, electricity, food, whatever, just to function and be a society that is somewhat efficient, I would say. And this means that unnecessary products such as excessive amounts of clothes or unneeded devices bought from sites like Amazon, Temu, H&M, Shein, all those places, is just adding to the general waste of society. And it's unneeded, but it's unneeded on top of being unneeded, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, the packaging alone is filling up landfills at an alarming rate. I bet every single one of us has a package or like packaging in our trash right now. I know I do.
Yeah.
And when especially like we're coming up to close to Christmas time, we're like ordering stuff offline. My favorite thing to always do as a kid was like make box forts, but I never thought of like where those box forts go because we didn't have recycling. Now we do. I guess my mom's trying to be a little bit better with it, but especially back home. But no, like most people just let that pile up, throw it in the trash, never think about it again, and that is a huge problem.
I really liked what you said about returns because I don't know about you guys, but if I order something online and I don't like it, I've never once returned it. I think it's just I never buy things online that are super expensive.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's just more of a hassle to return things. So I think that's also super interesting to think about on top of what happens to things that do get returned.
Yeah.
I want to talk about today why people purchase fast fashion and some ways to combat your consumption. Many people, especially young adults like us, buy fast fashion because it's typically much more affordable than sustainable fashion. But why is it so cheap? Anna added some great insight earlier, but I want to focus on 2 main points. The first one is that many designs from fast fashion businesses are actually taken from independent businesses and sold for a fraction of the cost. The items are typically lower quality than the original product, and this in turn makes it harder to sell quality textiles because people begin expecting these super low prices. In an article on micro trends and overconsumption, they state, by normalizing low prices for clothing garments, sites like Shein work to depreciate the value of textile labor, undermining the work of independent and sustainable designers. And I know there's a big push recently for small businesses and things like that, and fast fashion really harms small businesses because when you're creating things alone or with a small group of people, you have to charge a little more because you're spending a lot of your time doing it. So mass producing things like Shein and Temu and things like that make it really hard for small businesses to really take off.
Yeah. When you talk about like Shein looking at small business and like their designs, I remember seeing a TikTok. It's like a Shein, I don't know, not like I think Scout would be like the best word for it, but it's like one of their employees like going out to like these design meetings and like big fairs and like taking notes on small business like designs so they can like replicate it and sell it for cheaper.
That's crazy.
It's terrible because they're essentially ripping off like the small man, the person that's trying to make, like, let's say this is some family's passion and they just really want to start a small business and make clothes for people that mean something, and then Shein comes over here and rips them off, and not really rips them off, but like copies their design, sells it for way less than is like actually feasible, and then people just get all mad the fact that they're not getting the product that they think they're getting.
Yeah, especially like I follow this one girl, and I remember her. She's from my hometown, and she started a company where she makes her own bathing suits. Like she literally makes them by hand, and then she has a couple of her girlfriends, and she made an Instagram page, and I've seen she's already like got up a couple followers or many followers, and she's already done so well. But her bikinis, they're really expensive. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're so cute, but I don't know if they would fit me well, and then I'd feel like if I would return them, like I'd be like, I would feel bad. And also about like the returns, I wonder what like the like Shein's policy is for returns, and how Xander mentioned they go from like 5 different places around the world, and I wonder like, does Shein have a policy, and like why can't, if they're in good condition, why couldn't you just like resell them, I guess?
Yeah. I also think these designs being stolen really affect work that's done by hand, like knitting and things like that like are little details that get added on by an actual person and not a machine, because you have to pay those people for the hours of work they're doing for one item. So it does make the price a lot more expensive. And with sites like Shein, they make the price less than $20 a lot of the time. So it feels like you're wasting your money to buy these nicer quality items. The second reason for the cheap prices come from the fact that employees receive meager incomes. Many fast fashion brands do a majority of their production in developing countries like Bangladesh or Cambodia, and some fast fashion companies even utilize child labor in garment productions, which I don't know about you guys, but I'm not really a big fan of children making my clothes.
I agree with that.
The working conditions in these factories are often also very unsafe and have led to the death in the Dhaka garment factory collapse. I'm pretty sure around 30 people died in that, which is just crazy to think about. These people that were just, trying to live and make an income, and they were in these super unsafe conditions that eventually led to their death. That same article from earlier also notes that clothing garments found at retailers such as H&M and Zara have been manufactured using slave labor, exploiting workers in developing nations who are forced to work in inadequate conditions, earning very little relative to the labor they provide. Fast fashion makes clothes affordable for many people, but are the low prices actually worth the worker exploitation and environmental harm? It's understandable to want affordable clothing. Since you have to wear it every day, you don't want to spend a fortune on things that are necessary. But there are other low-cost ways to buy clothing, like shopping at thrift stores or other resale stores. Their prices are often much lower than retail stores, and the clothing is often higher quality than fast fashion. You can even find really expensive things there. If you get lucky, sometimes you'll find like Calvin Klein or like other really nice brands.
Big
yeah.
brands.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can even find Shein there sometimes. If you want to buy Shein, you could go from there. Clothing life cycles are getting much shorter. The amount of wears a piece of clothing gets before it's thrown out is quickly shrinking. And I think this is really because of fast fashion, because I feel like when you are paying a low price for an item of clothing, you're more likely to buy it, even if you're not really sure if you're going to like it, if it's a really low price, like they are on Shein and Temu. So clothes are getting worn a lot less, also because of the low quality that comes from these fast fashion companies. We aren't asking you to stop buying clothing, and we aren't asking you to never shop for brand new clothes again and only go to the thrift store. We're just asking you to be more mindful about your clothing consumption. Think about how much you're buying, where you're buying from, if you can re-wear something in your closet. Not every event needs a brand new outfit. A lot of events you can find clothes from your closet, borrow some from a friend, try a thrift store. Just think next time before you make a purchase.
Completely agree.